Labour Party's alternative budget was one that was based on fairness, solidarity, it was practical and it was active. In meeting all of those criteria, what was being proposed was something that could have got an enormous, widespread public acceptance. That would be very different to what we had heard yesterday. And it's about politics. Now, the first thing I want to say is that the government were well served by those commentators who, for the last couple of weeks, followed indeed the Mrs. Thatcher recipe, Tina, there is no alternative. So we got a shabby discourse, a limited analysis, and the suggestion that you had an inevitability that was to be visited upon us. There was very little left to expectation. There was, of course, an alternative to Tina. Might be uncomfortable to mention it given some people, and that is Tara, that there are radical alternatives. But we have none, the discourse was incapable of a radical alternative. For example, former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern used frequently speak about his task force on citizenship. This was an opportunity for citizenship. You could, in the midst of a recession and coming out of it, define citizenship in terms of a floor below which people would not be allowed to fall. That didn't happen. Again, you should have said that you could have looked at issues of redistribution. Instead of any concept of redistribution, instead of a political economy that would include macroeconomics, that was beyond fiscal adjustment, what we got was a tawdry notion that there were certain steps that were the only steps and that these had to be taken. We got a disgraceful suggestion that somehow or another the entire population had created our problem. In fact, in the more recent weeks, you couldn't speak at all about how we came to be here. It was as if we are the position we are in. It was not the position to which we had been delivered by Fianna Fáil ministers, by those who were in charge of regulation and who failed us and who wrecked public trust, by those who had damaged Ireland's reputation abroad, and for which ordinary taxpayers now have to pay more taxes to service interest rates that are above the norm. These are truths, and to seek to avoid those truths was quite scandalous. Indeed, I begin to question the Taoiseach said he's here since '84. I'm here since '81. Since that time, I've been speaking about the consequences of inventing the de-peopled economy. This is speaking of the economy as a system where the people don't matter, the blind don't matter, the disabled don't matter, the graduates without jobs don't matter. Suddenly it's all the young people's fault who are failures before they immigrate. It isn't the failure of the economy. That limited thinking is neither practical nor moral, nor is it of any value in getting out of where we are. On the 29th of March 2009, a long time after I had come into this House, I put a question to the Minister for Finance, and I asked him as to what studies had been. I asked him in question number 59 on that day what proposals he may have had for gathering income from wealth. And he replied, I have been informed that no general research has been carried out over the past 10 years by either the Department of Finance or the Revenue Commissioners regarding the extent and breakdown of wealth as opposed to income. And that was always the case. The opposition in the old days to a wealth tax was not to the yield, it was to what it would reveal. And again, listening yesterday about, for example, to the tax breaks, the suggestion, for example, that somehow or another we've just come in like an attack of the flu, we've come into our present position. In 2004, annual tax reliefs cost us $8.4 billion, which was 22% of total taxation. That is the year when my colleague Joan Burton, spokesperson and Labour Party spokesperson on finance, raised the issue whether 48 people had a tax rate of less than 5%. And the Minister announced yesterday that he's made significant progress because those who are at the top of the heap will in fact actually have an effective tax rate that moves from 20.45 to 30%. The truth of it is, these people, there has been no clawback from those who accumulated and transferred wealth during the McCreevy years. In addition to that, let me put another figure in. Of those who availed of such tax breaks, say, in those years I'm talking about, 66% were on incomes of over 200,000. And then you look at all the rest in relation to the car parks, in relation to the spas, the health clinics, and all of the others. And you find that 77% were over 100,000. So those who had the money were forking it into all of these different tax breaks. In 1 year, the number of property invested abroad was 8.5 billion. I come back in the last minute or two to what I have to say now. Are any of these really paying for this adjustment, as it is called, what is in fact a gross mismanagement of the economy? Are any of these people really, at this stage, facing such an adjustment in the name of citizenship, to use an Ahern phrase? So that, for example, those who were quickest and deepest into the trough might in fact pay a fair share in getting us into a new concept. And I'm sick and tired of people being described as economists on television and otherwise in a public service broadcasting system that does not offer economic alternatives, but rather goes along with the drift of the inevitable. And they, in that what is very, very important is what kind of an analysis is made. I think that in relation to all of this, quite frankly, when it all quietens down, the suggestion that you say to the most vulnerable and the broken, when you say to the widows and the children and so forth, when you say to them, you now have to pay for all of this because it has to be. It's bad thinking. And really, I was mentioning about the economics. It's fascinating. When someone from the right-wing school, the paradigm that has failed, comes on, the subtitle in the interview is economist. When someone with the same qualifications offering an equal agenda comes on, the name of the trade union is put underneath it. It's as if we have a high priesthood of failure. The very same people who couldn't analyse the property bubble, who couldn't speak about our dependency on one source of revenue, are precisely the people who now say the poorest of the poor must be among those who are pushed to the front to pay for our adjustment. What a tragedy we are not using this recession to build citizenship, to have an active kind of politics that will put all the mechanisms for the job creation, the task forces before the green economy, task forces in the creative economy. Instead of cutting carers, recognise carers at work, doing a deal with the public service unions and the private sector to share work, create new work, talk about the working day, have in fact a decent society. Instead of a society that is deep into a drink problem, instead of insisting that, you could do all those things for citizenship. But the high priesthood of the Commentary Act, no more than the minister in here, have had neither the moral courage, the ability, or the commitment to speak about what would have been a genuine alternative. Labour's alternative. There was fair, there was in solidarity, there was effective, there was active, and that could have offered hope.